He had learned to live with the quiet pain that came from losing someone he loved more than life itself. The kind of pain that no one could see but him. The kind that quietly wrapped around his chest and tightened every morning when he woke up. His wife had been gone for years, vanished in what everyone called a tragic accident. The news had left him broken, but life had a way of forcing him to keep moving. He learned to wake up, eat, go to work, come home, and repeat. Each day was a shadow of the one before, and yet he had survived. He often visited her favorite cafe, the one she had loved for the aroma of fresh coffee and the calm music that played softly in the background. He didn't go there to meet anyone. He went there to feel close to her memory. He would sit in the same corner she used to occupy, staring at the empty seat across from him, imagining her laughter and the warmth of her hand in his. People around him thought he was lonely, maybe even obsessive, but he didn't care. It was his way of keeping a piece of her alive. On that ordinary afternoon, the rain outside tapped lightly against the windows, creating a rhythmic hum that matched the steady pulse of his thoughts. He had his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee, savoring the heat when he noticed her. She wasn't like anyone he had seen before. There was an urgency in her steps, a tremor in her voice, even as she tried to appear calm. She approached his table, and for a moment he didn't understand why she was looking at him the way she was. "Excuse me," she said softly, almost hesitantly. "I need to talk to you. It's important." He looked up at her, confused. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" She shook her head. "No, but I know something you don't. Something you need to hear. Your wife, she's alive." He blinked. For a second, his mind refused to comprehend what she had just said. Alive? It had been years. The funeral, the flowers, the quiet condolences from neighbors and friends, all of it had been real. How could she possibly be alive? The woman leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "I know it's hard to believe, but I saw her. She's in another town, living quietly under a different name. I can help you find her." His chest tightened. He couldn't breathe. The world seemed to slow down around him. Every memory of her, every lonely night he had spent staring at the ceiling, all of it collided into one sharp, painful point. He wanted to run, to scream, to call for someone to tell him this wasn't real, and yet a tiny spark of hope flickered inside him, fragile and hesitant. He could barely speak. How do you know this?" "I can't tell you everything right now," she said, her eyes darting nervously. "But I promise you it's true. If you want to find her, I can guide you." He sat there stunned, staring at the woman as if she had appeared out of a dream. His hands shook around the cup of coffee, leaving faint rings of condensation on the table. I don't know if I can believe you," he finally whispered. "You don't have to believe me right now," she replied softly. "Just think about it. If it's true, wouldn't you want to know? Wouldn't you want to see her again?" The rest of the day passed in a blur. He couldn't focus at work, couldn't concentrate on emails or meetings. Every few minutes, his mind went back to the words she had said. Alive. His wife was alive. Could it be possible? Could he have been living all these years in grief over a mistake, a lie, or someone else's secret? When he returned home, he stared at her photograph on the nightstand. It had been years since he had last touched it, but now he reached out instinctively, tracing the outline of her face with a finger. He could almost feel her warmth, her voice calling his name. He closed his eyes, letting the memories wash over him. The quiet mornings they had spent together. The late-night talks, the way she used to laugh when he told jokes she pretended weren't funny. He tried to call the woman who had approached him, but the number she had given seemed incomplete. He paced the apartment, every step echoing the racing of his heart. Could this really be happening? He couldn't trust his mind, yet he couldn't ignore the feeling in his chest that this was true. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to hope. Hope that she was still out there, that she had survived whatever danger or accident had separated them, and that maybe, just maybe, he would see her again. But along with hope came fear. Fear of rejection, fear of discovering that this was a cruel joke, fear of the truth being more complicated than he could bear. The night grew darker, and he sat by the window, staring at the city lights below. He remembered the day she disappeared, the calls he made that went unanswered, the frantic search he had undertaken, and the crushing realization that she was gone. He had tried to move on, till he stood there frozen, staring at the woman who had once been the center of his life. For a moment, nothing moved. No words, no sound, no breath. The years of grief, loss, and lonely nights felt like they had condensed into that single heartbeat. And yet, despite everything, there she was. Alive. Real. Right in front of him. She looked at him nervously, as if she feared he might turn away, as if she expected rejection. Her eyes flickered with a mixture of hope and caution. Slowly he stepped closer, unsure if his heart would survive the confrontation. I don't understand, he whispered. Why, how? Why didn't you? She raised a hand to stop him. Please, she said softly, let me explain. I couldn't, I had no choice. It wasn't your fault and it wasn't easy. But I've waited, hoping for the right moment, and now, I think it's time you know the truth. They moved inside the small, modest house. It smelled faintly of herbs and old books. A quiet, lived-in scent that reminded him of the home they had once shared. He could see the nervous tension in her posture, the way her hands fidgeted, and he realized that this reunion, though joyful, was terrifying for both of them. She began slowly, her voice trembling at first. Years ago, when I disappeared, it wasn't because I wanted to leave you. There were people, dangerous people, people from my past who wanted to hurt me. I had to vanish to protect you and everyone we cared about. I thought I could reach you once it was safe, but I never imagined how much time would pass. He listened, his mind racing. Every word she spoke answered some questions but opened new ones. He could see the weight she had carried, the fear she had endured, and a part of him felt both relief and guilt. Relief that she was alive, guilt that she had suffered alone while he had mourned her. When she finished, he took a deep breath. All these years, I thought you were gone. I thought I'd lost you forever. I mourned you. I lived in the shadows of your absence. And now you're here telling me it was never really over? She nodded. I never stopped thinking of you, of us. Every day I worried, hoped, and waited for a moment when I could tell you the truth without putting you in danger. He sank into a chair, his hands trembling. The flood of emotions was overwhelming, joy, anger, sadness, confusion. And now? Now it's safe? Yes, she said. I can finally be myself again. I can finally tell you everything. The following days were a whirlwind. He had spent years imagining this moment, and now that it had arrived, it was more complicated than he had expected. They spoke for hours, recounting memories, filling in the gaps of the years spent apart. He listened to her story of hiding, moving from town to town, changing names, living quietly, and avoiding anyone who might trace her. Every detail was heartbreaking, yet it confirmed that she had acted out of love and fear, not betrayal. He felt a mix of relief and frustration. You left me, he said quietly. I don't understand why. You could have told me somehow, anything. I spent years thinking you were dead. I couldn't, she whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. I tried. Every attempt I made to reach you failed. I didn't want you to get hurt. And the people who were after me, I didn't want them to find you. I thought hiding was the only way. He nodded slowly, taking in the gravity of her words. He wanted to yell, to cry, to hug her, and yet he was careful, aware of her fragile state. He realized that both of them had changed. The years had left their marks, and rebuilding trust and life together wouldn't be instantaneous. Over the next few days, he began retracing her steps, trying to understand the life she had lived while he had been mourning her. He visited towns she had lived in, met the people she had trusted, and learned about the quiet life she had led. She had worked at small clinics, volunteered at community centers, and kept a low profile to avoid detection. He was amazed at her resilience, at the courage it took to survive alone while keeping him safe from danger. At the same time, he began reflecting on his own life. The years he had spent mourning her, the routines, the loneliness, all of it was a testament to the depth of his love and loss. But now, with her alive, he had to reconcile those years with the present. Could he trust that they could rebuild what had been broken? Could he forgive her for disappearing without explanation? Even if it had been for his safety? They decided to take small steps. They walked in quiet parks, sat in cafes reminiscing, and visited places that had been meaningful in their past. Each interaction was cautious but honest. They laughed, sometimes nervously, at familiar jokes. They cried together when memories became too heavy. Every day was a mixture of hope and fear, joy and uncertainty. He realized that the love they had shared had not disappeared. It had transformed, grown quieter but no less potent. And she too had carried her feelings even in solitude. Their reunion wasn't just about finding each other. It was about discovering that time and distance could not erase what was genuine between them. One evening, after weeks of tentative reconnection, he suggested visiting the place where she had vanished years ago. The path along the river, the bridge where he had waited for hours hoping to see her return, it was all still there. He held her hand tightly as they walked, feeling the warmth and reality of her presence. "I thought I'd never see this again," he said softly. "I thought I'd never see you again." She squeezed his hand. "I know, and I'm sorry for the pain I caused, even if it was meant to protect you." That night they sat together at her small home, talking about the future. He realized that while the past could not be changed, the future was still theirs to shape. The fear, the loss, the years of absence, all of it had brought them to this moment, stronger and wiser. He knew that danger from her past still lingered, but now he had a purpose: to protect her, support her, and help her regain the life she had been forced to hide from. They made plans to contact old allies, secure her safety, and rebuild trust with those who had been left in the dark. After weeks of cautious reconnection, he realized that seeing her alive was only the beginning. The reunion had brought relief and joy, but it also revealed just how much had changed, and how much work lay ahead to rebuild the life they had once shared. Each day was a delicate balance of trust, memory, and adjustment, as they navigated the fragile space between past pain and present possibilities. He spent mornings observing her routines, learning the new rhythms she had developed in her years of hiding. Simple things like the way she brewed tea or arranged her books fascinated him. He noticed habits that were both familiar and strange, reminders of the woman he had loved and the person she had become. Sometimes he watched silently from the doorway, letting her move freely while feeling a mix of pride and wonder. She, too, was adjusting to his presence. She had grown cautious, protective of herself, and wary of the world around her. Every time they left the house together, her eyes scanned the surroundings instinctively, as if looking for signs of the danger that had forced her into hiding. He understood this instinct now. He knew that trust wasn't built in a single moment. It was earned gradually, one step at a time. One afternoon he suggested they visit the town where they had first met years ago. The streets were familiar yet changed, the cafe where they had shared countless mornings still standing, and the park where they had walked hand in hand now filled with new families and children playing. Walking together, they held hands tentatively at first, then more confidently as the memories resurfaced. "I never imagined I'd come back here with you," she said softly, her voice carrying a mix of nostalgia and wonder. "Neither did I," he replied, squeezing her hand gently. "But here we are. We made it." The town brought both comfort and unease. Comfort, because it reminded them of the love they had once shared. Unease, because every familiar sight was a reminder of what they had lost, the years spent apart and the dangers she had endured. But together they found solace in small joys: the smell of fresh bread from the bakery, the laughter of children playing near the fountain, the gentle warmth of sunlight on their faces. As they walked, she opened up about her years in hiding. She told him about the places she had lived, the people she had trusted, and the constant vigilance that had defined her life. She spoke of loneliness, fear, and resilience, and he listened with a mixture of awe and sorrow. He realized the depth of her strength, the courage it had taken to survive alone, and the sacrifices she had made for their safety. He shared his own experiences as well: the nights he had cried quietly, the routines that had kept him alive, the longing for her presence that never faded. They spoke for hours, filling in the gaps of the years they had lost, bridging the distance created by time and circumstance. Each conversation brought them closer, but also revealed the challenges they would face in rebuilding trust and intimacy. One evening, as they returned from a long walk, they found a letter slipped under the door. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the message was clear. Someone from her past had found a way to contact her. The letter was simple but alarming: a warning to be cautious, a reminder that danger had not entirely disappeared. Her face paled as she read it, and he felt a surge of protectiveness. "We'll handle this," he said firmly, taking her hand. "We'll be careful and we'll face it together." She nodded, grateful yet anxious. "I don't want to put you in danger," she said softly. "You've already protected me for years," he replied. "Now it's my turn to protect you." The next days were tense. They limited outings, avoided crowded areas, and maintained vigilance in everything they did. Despite the fear, they also found moments of peace, cooking meals together, sharing quiet evenings with music playing softly in the background, and laughing at the smallest of jokes. These moments reminded them that life could still be beautiful, even after years of hardship. One night, she confided in him about her fears of returning fully to the world. "I've been so careful for so long," she said. "I don't know if I can ever be completely free." He held her close. "We'll take it slow. You don't have to face everything at once. I'll be with you every step of the way." In the following weeks, they began making plans for a safer, more stable future. They contacted old friends who could be trusted, researched secure places to stay, and even spoke to professionals who could advise them on personal safety. Each decision was deliberate, aimed at rebuilding a life that could withstand the threats of the past while allowing them to move forward together. During this time, he also noticed subtle changes in himself. The years of grief had left their mark, but seeing her alive and safe reignited a sense of purpose. He was no longer just surviving. The days following their cautious reconnection were filled with careful adjustments and small triumphs. He had always imagined that reuniting with her would be a moment of pure joy, a happy ending to years of grief. But now he realized it was only the beginning of something far more complicated. Their lives had diverged in ways neither could have foreseen, and the shadows of the past still lingered in corners they hadn't yet explored. They spent long mornings talking, their conversations drifting between memories of the past and plans for the future. Every laugh, every shared glance was a reminder of the bond that had survived the years apart. Yet every silence carried weight, unspoken fears, lingering doubts, and the understanding that rebuilding trust and intimacy would take time. One afternoon, as they walked along the edge of a quiet park, she stopped suddenly, her gaze fixed on a distant figure approaching. He followed her line of sight and saw a man standing across the path watching them. The man's presence felt familiar to her, though she hesitated before revealing why. "It's someone from my past," she whispered. "Someone I hoped I'd never see again." He instinctively stepped closer, shielding her slightly as the man drew nearer. She explained that years ago, before she had disappeared, this man had been involved in the situation that forced her into hiding. She had managed to evade him then, but his presence now reminded her that danger could still be real, even after all this time. The encounter was brief. The man said nothing but left as quietly as he had appeared. She exhaled a shaky breath and turned to him. "This is why I had to disappear," she said, her voice trembling. "I couldn't risk your life. I couldn't risk anyone finding you through me." He held her hand tightly. "We'll face it together. Whatever comes, we'll handle it. You're not alone anymore." That night, they sat in her small home, reviewing plans for her safety. They spoke in low voices, weighing options, considering secure locations and planning contingencies. The past that had kept her isolated now demanded careful attention. But alongside the fear, there was a shared determination to reclaim their lives, fully, without hiding in shadows. In the following days, they began reconnecting with people from her past whom she could trust. Old friends, allies who had supported her in the years of disappearance, provided guidance and reassurance. Each interaction was measured and cautious, but it also offered glimpses of normalcy. Slowly, the world began to feel less threatening, more familiar and more welcoming. Amidst the planning and caution, moments of quiet intimacy reminded them of the love that had never truly faded. Simple gestures, a shared cup of coffee, brushing hair from her face, holding hands in silence, became anchors in a turbulent reality. These moments allowed them to breathe, to savor what they had regained even as challenges loomed. One evening, they revisited a neighborhood she had once called home. The streets were lined with memories, some painful, some joyful. They walked slowly hand in hand, recalling laughter and tears from years ago. "It's strange," she said softly, "to be back here knowing what I've been through and still feel safe with you by my side." He squeezed her hand. "We've survived so much, and now we get a second chance. We can create a life that's ours, cautious maybe, but ours." The months that followed were a careful blend of hope, determination, and cautious joy. Every day they spent together strengthened the bond that had endured so many years and challenges. Rebuilding their life was not easy. There were reminders of the past, fleeting shadows, unanswered questions, and memories that sometimes felt too heavy to bear. Yet, each obstacle only reinforced their desire to move forward, together, as a team. He had learned that love was not about perfection or constant happiness. Love was resilience, patience, and commitment through hardship. And now, seeing her alive, safe, and slowly reclaiming her life, he understood the depth of that truth more profoundly than ever. They had begun integrating fully into the world again. She had taken steps to reconnect with her professional life in the small town she had been living in. The local clinic welcomed her back warmly, and her colleagues who had known her for years were astonished and relieved to see her safe. At first, she was hesitant, still cautious about public attention, but he encouraged her gently, always by her side, reminding her that they were facing the world together. At home, their routine began to take shape. Mornings were filled with quiet coffee by the window, afternoons with walks or errands, and evenings with long conversations. They spoke about small things, memories, dreams, future plans, and big things, fears, regrets, and desires for their life together. Through this, he realized how much they both had grown during their time apart. She had become stronger, wiser, more cautious, and yet still filled with warmth and love. He too had evolved, more patient, understanding, and appreciative of every moment they shared. One afternoon, while they were organizing her belongings, he discovered a collection of letters she had written over the years she had been in hiding. She had never sent them. Letters meant for him, full of love, longing, and explanations for her absence. He read them carefully, each word deepening his understanding of the struggles she had faced and the choices she had been forced to make. "I didn't know," he whispered, handing her one of the letters. "I didn't realize how much you carried alone." She smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. "I wanted to protect you. I never wanted you to suffer because of me, but now you know the truth, and now we can move forward." The feeling of finally sharing everything was freeing. They began to plan a future that honored both the years lost and the time they had now. They discussed travel, work, hobbies, and small adventures, the ordinary yet precious aspects of life that they had once taken for granted. However, challenges were not entirely gone. There were still remnants of the past, people and situations connected to the danger that had once forced her into hiding. Occasionally, he received subtle warnings or messages that reminded him vigilance was necessary. They worked together, carefully evaluating risks and implementing safety measures. He learned that protecting her was now a shared responsibility, one they approached with patience and teamwork. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day of planning and reviewing their safety measures, they sat together on the porch. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the small town they were slowly making their own. She leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "The years apart, the pain, everything we went through?" She shook her head softly. "No, it was painful, yes. But it brought us here. It made us stronger. And it taught me the value of what we have now. I wouldn't trade that for anything." He held her closer, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "Neither would I. And I promise from now on I won't let anything take this from us. No fear, no danger, nothing." As the days turned into weeks, their life began to feel normal, though richer and more intentional than ever. They laughed together, cooked together, walked through the town hand in hand, and reconnected with old friends cautiously. The freedom to live without constant fear was exhilarating, and they savored every small victory. He noticed that the trust between them had grown immensely. The years of separation had tested their bond, but it had never broken. Every decision, every careful step they had taken together had solidified their connection. He realized that true love could endure time, distance, and hardship, that it could survive even when hope seemed lost. One afternoon, while visiting a local community center where she had volunteered before, they were met with smiles and warm greetings. People remembered her fondly and expressed relief that she was safe. It was a small but significant step, a recognition that her life could now be fully reintegrated, that she could participate openly without fear. He felt proud and relieved, knowing that together they were reclaiming what had been taken from her. Back at home, they discussed future plans more openly than ever. Travel, work, and hobbies were now part of their conversations. They even considered moving to a larger city to ensure both safety and opportunities. but they agreed to take one step at a time. Each decision was made together, with respect for each other's feelings, needs, and pace. The emotional weight of their reunion was not always easy to bear. There were moments of doubt, of vulnerability, when the past threatened to overshadow the present. But each time they confronted it together, speaking openly, reassuring each other, and strengthening their bond. He also reflected on how much she had changed him. The patience he had cultivated, the appreciation for small moments, and the ability to face uncertainty with courage were all gifts from their shared journey. He understood now that surviving separation and hardship could deepen love in ways he had never imagined. One day, while walking through a local market, he noticed the way people looked at her, with recognition, respect, and curiosity. She had lived a life that many could not understand, yet she carried herself with dignity and quiet strength. He felt an overwhelming pride, knowing that this remarkable woman who had survived so much was now part of his life again. That evening they returned home and sat together on the porch once more. The stars were bright above them and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves. "We've come so far," she said softly. "I never thought I would see this day." He took her hand, holding it tightly. "And we've still got so far to go, but we'll do it together. Nothing can break us now." The final weeks of rebuilding their life were filled with both challenges and triumphs. They faced lingering fears, addressed practical concerns, and worked to strengthen the foundations of their safety and happiness. Each day brought progress, whether through shared laughter, quiet reflection, or the careful handling of past threats. As the story reaches its conclusion, he realizes that the journey has changed them both. The years of separation, fear, and uncertainty had tested their love, but it had also strengthened it. They had learned to face life with courage, to trust each other completely, and to cherish every moment together. The last evening of Part 5 finds them sitting quietly, watching the sunset. He turns to her, his heart full of gratitude and love. "We've been given a second chance," he says softly. "A chance to live, to love, to rebuild everything we thought was lost." She smiles, leaning into him. "Yes, and this time we won't let anything take it away." The story closes with a sense of calm, hope, and enduring love. They have survived separation, fear, and uncertainty. They have reclaimed their life together, carefully, courageously, and intentionally. The past has shaped them, but it no longer defines them. Their love, trust, and resilience are the foundation of a life rebuilt, a life lived fully, side by side, ready to face whatever comes next. Their focus turned to planning for a more permanent solution. They explored secure homes, safe towns, and trusted contacts. Every choice was deliberate, each step guided by the need for security and stability. At the same time, they were determined not to let fear dominate their lives. They wanted to live fully, embracing the present while respecting the lessons of the past. The process was not without challenges. Occasionally, news arrived that reminded them of lingering threats, subtle signs that the danger had never entirely disappeared. Anonymous letters, fleeting shadows outside windows, messages that vanished before they could be traced. Each reminder was unsettling, but it also reinforced the importance of vigilance, planning, and teamwork. Through these trials, they discovered the depth of their resilience. They were no longer two individuals haunted by the past. They were partners navigating uncertainty together. Each day reinforced their bond, each obstacle tested their trust, and each success strengthened their hope. One afternoon, she confided in him about her fears of fully reintegrating into the world. "I've lived so long in hiding," she said. "The idea of being seen openly without caution feels terrifying." He listened carefully, holding her hand. "We'll take it one step at a time. You won't face anything alone. We'll build your life together, safely, slowly, until the fear becomes just a memory." The next weeks were filled with cautious adventures. They walked in markets, visited parks, and attended community events, always vigilant but gradually more confident. Each successful outing was a victory, each moment of joy a small reclamation of the life they had been denied. As they reconnected with the world, they also rebuilt connections with each other. Long talks at night explored dreams, regrets, and the shared vision of a future unburdened by fear. They laughed more easily now, smiled without hesitation, and allowed themselves to imagine happiness. During this time, he noticed how much she had grown. Her resilience, compassion, and quiet strength inspired him. She had endured years of solitude and fear, yet she remained kind, thoughtful, and courageous. Witnessing her navigate the world again, slowly but surely reinforced his admiration and deepened his love. They also began addressing the emotional scars from their separation. He shared his experiences of loss, loneliness, and grief, while she recounted the years of vigilance, fear, and isolation. Together, they acknowledged the pain, forgave mistakes, and created a foundation of understanding. Each conversation strengthened their bond, turning vulnerability into connection. One evening, they sat by the river near the town where she had once disappeared. The sun set in brilliant colors, reflecting on the water. "It feels like the world has opened up again," she said quietly. He nodded. "It has, and we'll face it together. No more running, no more hiding. This is our chance to live freely, safely, and fully, as long as we stay together." Her smile was tentative but genuine. "I'm ready," she whispered. As Part 4 closes, they are no longer merely surviving. They are actively reclaiming life. The challenges of the past still exist, but so does the possibility of a future built on trust, love, and resilience. They have learned that safety, happiness, and love are not given. They are created together, one careful, courageous step at a time. Was living again, invested in the life they could now create. Each day brought challenges, but also a renewed sense of hope and determination. They visited local clinics where she had worked, reconnecting with colleagues who remembered her fondly. The warmth of these reunions reinforced the idea that she had lived a meaningful life even while in hiding. It also helped him understand the depth of her character, her compassion, resilience, and unwavering commitment to helping others despite her circumstances. One afternoon, while organizing her old belongings, he found a journal she had kept during her years away. Reading it, he discovered her thoughts, fears, and hopes, the silent struggle she had endured, the plans she had made to return safely, and the constant longing she had felt for him. Each page was a revelation, deepening his understanding of her experience and strengthening the bond between them. He realized that the past could not be changed, but it could be acknowledged and understood. They began talking openly about the years apart, sharing regrets, forgiving mistakes, and slowly rebuilding trust. Each conversation was both painful and healing, reminding them that their love had endured not because it had been easy, but because it had been true. As the days turned into weeks, they also began to reconnect with the world beyond their small town. They ventured out cautiously, visiting nearby communities, attending small gatherings, and engaging with neighbors. Each outing was a test of courage, a step toward reclaiming a life that had been overshadowed by fear and secrecy. During one such visit, they encountered someone who had known her in the past, a man who had once been a friend and ally. He greeted her warmly, expressing surprise and relief at seeing her safe. This encounter reinforced the reality that while the past had been difficult, there were people who could be trusted, allies who could help them navigate the present challenges. Through these experiences, he began to understand that their reunion was not just about being together, it was about creating a foundation of trust, security, and shared purpose. They were learning to navigate a world that had moved on without them, discovering how to balance caution with freedom, and rebuilding the connection that had been interrupted by circumstances beyond their control. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset, she spoke quietly. "I've spent so many years hiding, running, and fearing what might happen. But now with you here, I feel like I can finally breathe." He took her hand and held it tightly. "We've survived so much. Now it's time to live, not just survive." Together. The next days were filled with careful planning. They developed strategies for safety, researched options for relocation if needed, and slowly integrated her back into the community. Each success, no matter how small, strengthened their confidence and their bond. Through it all, he noticed the subtle changes in her demeanor, the way she smiled more freely, laughed more easily, and held her head higher. The fear that had once dominated her life was being replaced by hope, courage, and a renewed sense of possibility. He also reflected on his own transformation. The grief, the loneliness, and the quiet despair had shaped him, but they had also prepared him for this moment. He had learned patience, resilience, and the power of hope. And now, with her alive and by his side, he realized that life could be full of second chances if only one was willing to take them. As Part 3 closes, They are no longer merely reunited. They are beginning to reclaim the life that circumstances had tried to take from them. Their journey is far from over, but with trust, courage, and love as their guides, they are ready to face whatever comes next. Together. The days became a balance of normal life and careful planning. He returned to work but carried her presence in his thoughts. Every free moment was spent learning about her experiences, listening to her stories, and helping her reclaim independence. It was exhausting but fulfilling. Slowly, the town around them became a place of possibility rather than fear. They ventured out together, meeting neighbors and friends cautiously. People who had known her were surprised but supportive. She began participating in community events again, always with him nearby, a silent shield of love and protection. One afternoon, as they walked through a local park, she stopped to look at the horizon. "It's strange," she said, "to feel free after so many years of hiding." He smiled gently. "I can't imagine what you've endured. But I promise I won't let you hide anymore. You deserve to live openly, without fear." She leaned on his shoulder, grateful and exhausted. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything. For finding me, for believing me, for staying even when you could have given up." He felt the weight of her words, understanding fully that their journey was far from over. They had survived separation, fear, and uncertainty. Now the challenge was to rebuild a life together, to merge years of absence into the present, and to create a future that honored the love they had shared. Days turned into weeks, and their bond strengthened. They learned to communicate openly, to share fears without judgment, and to find joy in small moments. A morning coffee, a quiet walk, laughter at familiar jokes, or simply holding hands in silence. He realized that her return had not only rekindled love but also healed wounds he hadn't acknowledged. The grief that had shadowed him for years began to lift, replaced by purpose and renewed hope. And for her, the years of isolation were softened by the comfort of being seen, understood, and finally safe. Together, they took the first cautious steps toward reclaiming their life, knowing that the road ahead would have challenges, but confident that they would face them side by side. The reunion, though unexpected and overwhelming, became the foundation for a new chapter, one defined not by fear or separation but by trust, resilience, and the enduring strength of love that had survived even the darkest of years. If you want, I can continue immediately with part 3 in the same full 3,000-word style, keeping the tension, emotion, and suspense building naturally. Live a life without her, but he had never truly been able to. Every decision, every lonely meal, every empty evening had reminded him of her absence. Now, the possibility of her being alive changed everything. It meant that every tear, every sleepless night, every sorrow-filled day might have been in vain, or worse, that it had been built on a lie. And yet, the idea of seeing her again filled him with a determination he hadn't felt in years. He decided he couldn't wait. If there was even a small chance she was alive, he needed to act fast. He gathered all the information the woman had given him, wrote down every detail, and started making plans. He contacted old friends and acquaintances who might know more, tracing every clue, following every lead, no matter how small. Days turned into nights filled with frantic research. He visited old neighborhoods, called hospitals, asked about clinics and shelters, trying to find any sign of her existence. Each moment brought new anxiety. What if she didn't want to be found? What if she had moved on, had created a new life without him? But even those fears could not stop him. He had to know the truth. Late one night, he found a small piece of information, a name she had used in another town mentioned in a community newsletter. It was faint, almost easy to overlook, but it was enough to give him direction. His heart raced as he booked a trip to the town, feeling a mixture of excitement, terror, and hope. On the way, his mind replayed years of memories, both joyous and painful. He remembered the promises they had made to each other, the dreams they had shared, the little arguments that had seemed so important at the time but now felt trivial. He whispered her name under his breath, hoping she could hear him across the distance. When he arrived in the town, the streets were quiet, unfamiliar, yet he felt a strange sense of anticipation. Every passing stranger made his heart skip a beat. What if it was her? What if she had changed so much that he wouldn't recognize her? And yet he knew in his heart that some part of her would always remain the same. He walked slowly, scanning faces, searching for that one familiar smile, that one familiar glance. Hours passed, and fatigue began to set in, but he refused to give up. He remembered the woman who had approached him in the cafe and the urgency in her voice. He reminded himself that he had no time to waste. Every moment mattered. As evening approached, he found himself outside a small, modest house at the edge of town. Something told him this was it. He could feel it in his bones. He stood there, heart pounding, breath caught in his chest, and for the first time in years he allowed himself to imagine the possibility of holding her again, of hearing her voice, of knowing that she had survived. He knocked on the door, his hands trembling. And when the door opened and a familiar face looked back at him, his entire world shifted. The woman standing there looked exactly like the one he had loved for years, yet she was different, wary, cautious, and uncertain. For a moment neither spoke. The air between them was thick with memories, regrets, and unspoken words. He searched her eyes, trying to find the warmth, the love he remembered, the spark that had always drawn him to her. And then, slowly, recognition flickered in her gaze. "Yes," she whispered finally. "It's me." The moment was surreal, a mixture of disbelief, joy, and fear. Years of separation, pain, and longing collided into one intense instant, and in that moment, he realized that everything had led to this, to seeing her alive, to standing face to face with the woman he thought he had lost forever. He knew he had to act fast. That hesitation could cost him the chance to make things right, to rebuild what had been broken. And as he reached out to her, the world around them seemed to fade, leaving only the possibility of a future they had both thought impossible.